Good morning. How we doing? It's so good to be here in Texas, even though there's this crazy storm happening right now. I grew up in a small town just across the way from here in rural Arkansas, a town called Harmony Grove. And don't make me do my Bill Clinton impersonation. Harmony Grove is more of an intersection with a couple of schools, a school and a couple of churches. And it was a little spot where a lot of working class and working poor folks tried to make a better life. And I didn't know anything about unions growing up in rural Arkansas, which is all too common for kids who grow up in the South. And that's a shame. But I found the union, or the union found me, in the ways that tens of thousands of workers across the United States are finding the union right now. Just over in Louisiana, I figured out what I want to do with my life. I was working at a small college radio station, moving CDs around and lighting up the microphone to announce the next punk rock song coming on the radio. It's pretty good. I had dyed my hair orange at the time, which was also a mistake, but I was also out in the community recording conversations with locals. I was trying to tell their stories and put them on the air, and that's when I realized I wanted to be a journalist. So I got my first full-time job and went back to my state of Arkansas. And I was 22, and I was making $28,000 a year to be the online editor of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette in Northwest Arkansas. And somehow I was a manager at 22 years old, which is a bit silly. I had 5 part-time staff. I worked so much. I worked like 80 hours a week, and no one ever told me about overtime. They just kind of took advantage of me. But I really loved the work because I love to find stories and uplift them and share them. And eventually I forged a path out west and got a dream job at the Los Angeles Times, and I got to tell really great stories and uplift really awesome people. I got to tell folks about like different neighborhoods voting different ways in elections and like really dig into that. I got to talk to people about what it was like to live right next to a freeway that was just spewing pollution. I also got to like do stories about Girl Scout cookies. Do y'all know that there are 2 different types of Thin Mints? Yeah, okay, well, I looked it up, and Austin is getting the wrong end of the stick here. Dallas actually has the better Thin Mints. I don't know. We need to get a hold of those Girl Scouts about that. But I got to write weird stories, and it was really beautiful. And when I was working at the Los Angeles Times, we were under threat from our bosses, the owners. There was a bunch of rich guys out of Chicago who didn't know the first thing about running a newsroom. And they kept changing the management below them, and new guys would walk in with new ideas to save the industry and make everything better. But things only got worse. The wages remained flat or went the other way with inflation. Our benefits got worse. At one point, we had 7 different health care options with massive deductibles. And finally, one day, the company announced in like a secret video that they were taking away our accrued paid time off. Because we didn't have a union, so they could just take any benefit away from us. And that accrued paid time off was what some of us were saving for a surgery. Some of us were saving to have a kid. Or some of us were saving in case we got laid off, thinking that that would come and we needed a little bit of a buffer if that happened. And the company just took it away because the rich guys, the billionaires, were just like, well, that's something of value, and let's take it away from the workers and let's keep it. So when that moment happened, my colleague Anthony, he said to me, we should form a union, and my reply was, yes. What is that, and how do we do that? And y'all, that was 9 years ago. That's how recent that was. And we unionized at the Los Angeles Times, which hadn't had a union in its 130-year history. So I found the union, or the union found me in California, an Arkansas boy, a kid from a small town. But we couldn't stop there. We knew that we had a responsibility in Los Angeles to bring other people the union. And so over the last 9 years, we've won 264 organizing campaigns, bringing in 12,000 workers into our small little union. And y'all know it's not easy. It's not been easy for anyone in this room, has it? In fact, we are sitting or standing in the state where the phrase right to work was coined. Y'all know that? On Labor Day in 1941, an editor at a Texas newspaper coined the phrase right to work in a column pushing for a constitutional amendment that would allow anyone represented by a union to refuse to pay dues. 1941. And we all know that many states took up that legislation to fight workers. And that was funded by billionaires. That's right. And sadly, my home state of Arkansas was actually the first in the nation to pass a right-to-work amendment. And I got to tell you, Arkansas is never first in anything. Typically, we are second to last place, and the state motto is, "Thank God for Mississippi." True. But I will tell you that I was really proud that 79 years after that newspaper column and 76 years after the state of Arkansas passed a right-to-work amendment and 73 years after Texas passed it as a statute, the journalists at that newspaper unionized. I'm talking about the Dallas Morning News, y'all. I don't think they saw that coming. At the victory party, when we won our first contract, our photographer, Smiley Poole, looked out at his colleagues, and he said that every journalist in the newsroom had an important responsibility. Smiley said Dallas could not have won without the help of the rest of the union and the rest of the state. And he told his colleagues that it was now time for Dallas to pay it forward. And he made the pitch for everyone to sign up and pay dues in a right-to-work state at the newspaper where the bosses had coined the phrase. And today, I'm proud to tell you that 95% of the journalists at the Dallas Morning News paid dues, and they pay it forward to the rest of us. Not only with the portion of their paychecks, our members in Dallas organized alongside our members at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and here at the Austin American-Statesman. They were all organizing at the same time. And their fight helped others in Texas realize that, you know what, they could organize too. And so then the journalists at the Texas Tribune and the San Antonio Report also organized. And Smiley, our photographer in Dallas, he told his colleagues at the victory party, we are one group. We are not on an island by ourselves across the table from management, beating our heads against the wall. We are really one group. And that's what a union is. That's what the labor movement is. And I know it can feel like we're beating our heads against the wall and we're alone, but we're not. We're not alone. When we had our first open-ended strike ever at a newsroom in the state of Texas, everyone in this room, including the Texas AFL-CIO, stepped up to support our journalists at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So thank you for that. Thank you for paying it forward to them so that they could pay it forward to the rest of us. And we've helped thousands of journalists organize across the entire continent, and that's changed the way that we journalists cover the struggle of workers. When workers, like journalists, go through a fight of organizing, a fight of bargaining, a fight of collective action, and a fight of striking, it wakes us up. That collective action fuels us. It centers us. And the thousands of recently organized journalists across the United States have become better journalists for it, because we now have been through the fight ourselves and struggled and won. And today we are witnessing a fight that makes us feel like we are beating our heads against that wall that Smiley talked about, a fight funded by billionaires. And we have a moment now that will decide whether we fall apart or whether we're able to build a fight and fight back and stick together and build something new. We are witnessing Guild journalists and CWA journalists who are reporting on the concerted and targeted and violent U.S. government attacks. Just a few minutes ago, there was news that a reporter was pepper sprayed in the face for covering protests in Minnesota. And at the same time, there was news that federal agents had just murdered another person in Minnesota for observing ICE and DHS. This is an attack on working people. This is an attack on unions. This is an attack on our neighbors and our family and our friends. What's clear is that billionaires feel emboldened, and billionaires got rich because they stole from us, right? These billionaires, they feel emboldened to steal more from us now and make themselves richer. And billionaires, on behalf of billionaires, mass government agents are knocking down doors and taking workers captive, taking our members captive. I have a member right now from Minnesota sitting in one of these camps over here in El Paso, taken from his family, taken from his wife. He's a union steward. Deserves dignity because he fights for other people. Fights for people in his neighborhood, fights for people in his workplace. Billionaires are the ones helping our government rescind workers' rights, end safety regulations, destroy healthcare protections, eliminate the agencies that are taxed to actually protect and enforce the law and support workers. They're attacking our right to organize, crippling the NLRB, crippling OSHA, shredding the collective bargaining agreements and the union rights of millions and millions of workers right now. Our union, the NewsGuild and the CWA, has seen its hard-won right to organize workers in the microchip and semiconductor industry rescinded. And the good union jobs that CWA secured as part of a build-out of wind power have been destroyed. Money fought and won that would force equitable build-out of gigabit fiber internet was not exactly rescinded entirely, but it was redirected to Trump's favorite billionaire, Elon Musk. Crappy internet service beamed down from soda cans in the sky. Elon Musk wants us all to use Starlink, controlled by a billionaire who can decide to turn it on or off depending on how high on ketamine he is. Our higher education workers are under siege as the promise of academic freedom is eliminated, and CWA nurses are seeing safe working conditions eliminated, safe staffing levels rescinded, and many rural hospitals see the promise of health care for their community rescinded as Medicaid cuts close the only place to get stitched up in miles. And billions have been pulled from public media where our members work, where many of us get our news from PBS and NPR. Funds for Voice of America, which was actually started by Republicans, and Radio Free Asia. We've had members there. Those funds have been pulled and those jobs have been lost. And so we have to fight back. In the courts and on the shop floor and in the streets. Our union and unions all across the country are best equipped to fight these billionaire bullies and bosses. And we know what a boss fight looks like. Y'all know this. We know every time we bargain a contract. We don't just beat our heads against the wall, right? We beat them by filing grievances. If you've won just cause protections in your contract, you beat the boss. If you've increased pay, you've taken money out of their wallets, right? It's our money. They want to take it from us. We bargain to limit surveillance so that we can do our jobs without being watched by some creepy boss or some AI robot trained by a billionaire. We force them to show just cause before they discipline or discharge us. And we organize, y'all. We march on the boss. At the Guild, we have some experience fighting billionaire bullies and rich guys, like our recent strike in Pittsburgh. We were on strike for 1,132 days, 3 years, 3 months, 1 week, against the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's owned by a couple of rich guys out of Ohio, and those guys broke the law. They took away our health care and they ripped up our contract. And we knew what we had to do in that moment. We had to stand up, fight back. We walked out of that newsroom and we held the boss to account. We picketed the publisher's wedding reception, was quite fun. And we protested at the editor's house. We had our inflatable rat, Scabby. He was running around and chasing the boss wherever he popped up. And along the way, we kept winning in court. Finally, just this month, we won when the U.S. Supreme Court refused to issue a stay to stop an injunction against that boss. And now these bosses are actually looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for being in contempt of court. And that's wild, y'all, to think that the Supreme Court's doing anything decent these days. But it did. There was a moment when we walked back in at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in November after we got our court victory. And our local president, Andrew Goldstein, who we affectionately call Goldie, grabbed the microphone to a crowd of about 150 supporters out in that room. Steelworkers were there, SEIU was there, AFT was there, CWA was there. And Goldie talked about that strike for more than 3 years. And he said, quote, "Journalism has been called the first rough draft of history. But journalists don't set out to make history themselves. Our job is to seek truth, to hold power to account. Our job is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted." And Goldie said, "We sought truth. We held power to account. We afflicted the comfortable, and we comforted the afflicted." And he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out a pen, which is the weapon of journalism and of free speech and of a free press in this country. In fact, it's a pencil and a wrench that are on this logo for this convention right now. And Goldie lifted that pen above his head in a closed fist, and he said to the crowd, "Take our pen, seek truth, hold power to account, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted." And Goldie said, and he really yelled this, "Take our pen and fight!" And so at the Guild and CWA, we're launching a fight against oligarchy. We have a training where we're going to train every single one of our members in our union, because we have to get the word out and tell every union member who the billionaire bosses really are. Because billionaire bosses are stealing from us, and they're trying to control what we see and what we hear and how we live. They're gobbling up newsrooms right here in Texas, and they want to destroy outlets so we have fewer options to choose from. That's why we've been organizing as journalists. Together, we can make sure that we can report the news that you deserve, to bring you the truth of what's really happening in our world and in our communities and our neighbors and our state. And here in Texas, that's under threat. Last February, the Austin American-Statesman was sold to a company called Hearst, which is based up in New York City. And Hearst was founded by billionaires of their day, and those billionaires, they fought our unions, they fought journalists, they even fought the New Deal. And our journalists in Austin had organized and fought and struck over 3.5 years to win their first contract. And not 3 months later, Hearst announced that they were buying the place, and they obliterated our contract. And they started threatening our members and laying them off here in Austin. And then Hearst, they set their sights on the Dallas Morning News last July, announcing a takeover there. And shortly after they took over, Hearst moved to eliminate and offshore the entire copy desk to Canada in violation of our contract. Of course, we filed a grievance in ULP, doing collective actions. Let me tell you, as someone who worked in a small town newspaper in a southern state, we need local journalists here who live and are a part of our communities, who know who our football teams are, who know our street names and how to spell them. Sometimes can be a little difficult. And we need people who know our school boards and who are at our city council meetings, because journalists are the ones who are actually minding the stores. They're the ones holding our elected leaders to account. But Hearst, this corporate behemoth, it's trying to outsource jobs. Our journalists across Texas are fighting, and they need your help. We have 3 demands. Ensure that the news is produced and edited by humans, not robots, not AI, and agree to contract language that protects those journalist jobs here in the state of Texas. That every journalist should be able to be paid enough to be able to live in the communities that they cover. Finally, to respect the media workers of Texas. These are historic newsrooms. Abide by our collective agreements and follow the law and stop outsourcing and offshoring jobs to Canada from here in Texas. These jobs should stay in Texas. So delegates in all the Texas labor movement, please stand with our members here in Texas. You can scan, there's going to be a QR code put up right there, and you can scan that QR code and you can send a letter to Hearst bosses right now. We have to stand up and fight these billionaires. And now, if you'll indulge a journalist, I have some questions for the room. Will you organize and help every worker in this state find and build a union? Yes. Will you continue to pay it forward so that we can build a fighting labor movement that makes sure every worker has a living wage? Will you fight for Texas? Will you fight for Texas journalists who seek truth and report it, who ultimately work for you? Yes. Will you join us and hold every boss and every billionaire to account? Yes. Then stand up! This is our labor movement. Built off the backs of generations of workers who struggled before us and won. Who fought billionaires, who dreamed big, who won. When workers are under attack, what do we do? When our neighbors are under attack, what do we do? When immigrants in our communities are under attack, what do we do? When journalists are under attack, what do we do? When Texans are under attack, what do we do? That's right, stand up, fight back, solidarity, no, yolidarity forever.